Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a presentation that will consider the nature, the role, the impact and the importance or significance, particularly for victory, of air power. And these have been the focus of past questions. What's more, if the question specifically asks about technological development, you need to have a sound knowledge of those developments. Let me quote from a past mark scheme. There needs to be specific knowledge exhibited of the nature and impact of the technology. So, make sure you have that knowledge. Usually though, the question isn't specific to technological developments, but it can be, and it's best to be warned. And let me add one more thing in this introduction. Though air power was not that significant in World War I, in a question that asks you to compare and contrast two or more wars, World War I can still be a winner for you. Now, except for the use of balloons and dragons in Game of Thrones, war in the air was decidedly new in World War I. And though it was not to be a decisive factor, it was nevertheless to have an impact on the war itself, and a profound impact on the post-war psyche. And though I played down the role of the aeroplane, it played a bigger part in World War I than is often realised. It might surprise you to learn that in total, something like 170,000 aeroplanes had been produced by the end of the war. And by the end of the war, military leaders were in no doubt as to the aeroplane's tremendous potential as a weapon of war. And political leaders, apart from Hitler, were worried about that potential. It was the destructive power of the aeroplane that played a part in the thinking that led to Britain's appeasement of Hitler in the second half of the 1930s. So you could argue that the aeroplane's impact was greater after the war. The aeroplane was first used mostly for reconnaissance, flying behind enemy lines and reporting back on troop movements. This was done in the first campaigns of the war. They helped the French at the Battle of the Marne and the Germans at the Battle of Tannenberg. At Tannenberg, German spotter planes were able to feed back critical information about Russian troop positions that enabled the Germans to outmaneuver the Russians and secure a crucially important victory. They were soon being used as spotters to direct artillery fire. Aerial photography and radio equipment, which was also developed, helped in this important role. At the Battle of the Somme in 1916, photographs taken by reconnaissance flights were used to identify German defensive placements. Balloon observation posts were also used, which, although static, allowed observers to stay up high for hours on end, with a telephone link to the gun batteries below. However, some battery commanders were reluctant to hand over control of their guns to the pilots. Even in war, technology can be distrusted. That the role of the reconnaissance aircraft was proving so important is shown by the development of fighter planes to shoot them down. At first, this amounted to nothing more than shooting at each other using revolvers. But soon, forward-firing machine guns, synchronized to fire through the plane's propellers, were introduced, becoming more sophisticated as the war developed. Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, reached legendary status with 80 kills. Technological developments also led to faster planes, up to 180 kilometers per hour, and planes which were more maneuverable in the air. Anti-aircraft guns and gunners were also developed as the war went on, though it never got much beyond a hit-and-miss approach, guessing where the plane was going to be as a shrapnel shell was fired to bring it down. Whilst the British definitely held an advantage in the Battle of the Somme, overall Germany tended to have technically superior planes, though not faster actually, with the Entente powers having considerably more. By 1918, the plane was playing an important role in offensives across the Western Front and the other fronts too. They would bomb supplies behind the front, as well as targets such as artillery units. They would also strafe advancing or defending troops with their machine guns, causing considerable confusion in the lines, if not outright panic. When British forces attacked the Hindenburg Line in September 1918, 1,000 aircraft supported the assault, dropping more than 600,000 kilograms of bombs and letting off 26,000 machine gun rounds. Retreating troops made for easier targets. In one incident in the Middle East, the British bombed and strafed retreating Turkish troops for 3 days. The result was, as you might expect, sheer carnage. Planes were also used on bombing raids. For example, in the first September of the war, British planes bombed Zeppelin sheds in Cologne and Dusseldorf, and a successful long-distance bombing raid on Zeppelin sheds on Lake Constance was undertaken later in that first year of the war. British planes would bomb railway junctions inside Germany, railway workshops and engines, a chemical works and a gas works too. More than 700 German civilians would die in British air raids. Germany first used Zeppelins to bomb Britain. They were not of any strategic advantage, though the raids caused deaths and a public outrage. There was even a German attempt to undertake a joint air-naval attack on Britain, using Zeppelins, though bad weather and technical difficulties thwarted the attack. And a Zeppelin even bombed the naval base in Naples. But Zeppelins were big, slow-moving, and so easy targets. They were also expensive to build, much more expensive than planes. Using planes, the Germans bombed London and other towns and cities in Britain, and had drawn up a target list that included military bases and armament dumps, oil and petrol stores, and the London docks. But it was over-ambitious. The planes were not that technologically advanced. Germany had to await another war. Still, they succeeded in terrorizing populations. One bombing raid on London in 1917 resulted in the deaths of 162 civilians, including 15 children when their school was hit. Another 27 were maimed for life. And in total, more than 1,000 lives were lost as a result of German air raids. A raid on Paris in March 1918 led to 200,000 Parisians leaving the capital for safety in the countryside. Londoners were so concerned that they demanded an anti-aircraft defence system. The government first responded with anti-aircraft barrages, as well as anti-aircraft units positioned around the capital. a system of warning control centres, home defence squadrons and searchlight stations were also set up along the entire east coast. Londoners were also warned of a coming raid by a change in the gas pressure. When the gas lights went up and down twice, people knew a raid was coming, and they'd been instructed to draw their curtains. Planes could drop propaganda as well as bombs, and leaflets were dropped over Paris in August 1914, warning Parisians that German troops were approaching the capital. The French, British and Italians all followed suit, and on the Eastern Front both Germans and Russians leafleted each other's troops. So there you are. I think that should prove useful to you. I certainly hope so. Do please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and tell your friends about it. The more the merrier. But for now, let me, as always, thank you for listening and wish you the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.